Welcome back, everybody, to another jam-packed episode of the Seven Figures or Bust podcast, the number one podcast in the world for growing your insurance business. This is episode 52, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Christian Brindle. I'm joined with my co-host, Glen Shelton. Glen, good morning. Happy Monday. How was the weekend?
Good morning. Weekend was good. The Super Bowl was just lovely yesterday. I just want to take a second here at the start of the podcast. Lovely event that was held yesterday down in New Orleans. Super Bowl 59. For those of you who missed it, the Chiefs got curb stomped by the Eagles, which in my opinion was a long time coming. I know there's some diehard Chiefs fans in the audience, probably a tough Monday for you, and I'm sorry. But when you look at the games the Chiefs played this season, almost all of their wins were by one possession. That is not an elite football team. An elite football team is winning majority of their games by multiple possessions, 10, 14, 20 points. I'm shocked it took this long for a good old curb stomping to happen. So I would love to hear, before we get into we have some great topics today, by the way, you guys. But before we get into those, I would love to hear what your thoughts on the Super Bowl. Was there any marketing that stood out to you? Commercials. We could probably do an entire pod on commercials, but I would love really fast to get your take.
So I do have a confession to make about the Super Bowl.
Uh-oh.
So I didn't watch it until about 4 minutes left in the fourth. I did not turn it on. And I turned it on and I saw, it's a blowout. And I probably had it on for 5 minutes and then turned it off. Now, before people jump on me for that, this is probably the first Super Bowl I haven't watched since I was like a little kid. Like legitimately, like I historically will watch the Super Bowl. It's something that I do. And historically, like probably 3 to 5 years ago, I was following the league pretty closely. I knew a lot of the players and things like that. I just don't anymore. You know what I mean? Like, obviously I know Patrick Mahomes. Obviously I know, a lot of the Chiefs players, Travis Kelce, obviously I know Jalen Hurts, but I don't know
Taylor Swift.
Obviously I know Taylor Swift, the linebacker. But I don't know what it is, guys. I had a 5-year-old and a wife that was sick over the weekend. And so,
that'll do it.
A little tricky. I felt bad for them. So we ended up doing like a Jurassic Park marathon and lying in bed all day, the three of us. So they, so that was most of what we did yesterday. So, and I didn't really feel like I cared that much about missing the Super Bowl, to be honest. Like, and in years past, like, especially like even last year, I would have it on. I'd watch all of it. I'd watch the pregame. I'd watch the halftime show. I'd watch the commercial. I was just so into it. For some reason, I wasn't this year. Strange.
They weren't my teams by any means, you guys. As far as seeing the second I realized it was a rematch of the Eagles and Chiefs from just a couple years ago, I wanted someone new. I wanted the Bills. Give me the Commanders. Give me anybody. So I definitely empathize with that feeling. For me, it's like the cultural phenomenon, especially from as a marketing person, especially when I'm watching these commercials yesterday and you realize how much money was spent. For example, there was millions. I think it's $7 million for 30 seconds or something, roughly. That was like the last. There was a diaper commercial where essentially their 30-second slot, 20-second slot, it was just them saying, "Do you need to go potty? This is a great time to go poop. Go to the bathroom now." And you're just sitting there. It's like, wow, like they really spent $5, $6, $7 million on this. That's the stuff that's always fascinating to me.
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting. Like a lot of Super Bowl commercials are crafted so well, and a lot of times, like they're funny, they're memorable, but they are such a short, jam-packed time slot. They have to just cram everything they're trying to get at into this little message there, right? They have to pack in the memorability, the the memory of it all.
Nostalgia. The nostalgia.
They need to pack in the messaging. They need to, they need to make it funny, entertaining, all that stuff. But a lot of times, I mean, what's interesting is, these are like their best of the best commercials, and they're using it almost like as a time at the Super Bowl to reveal them for the first time, and then you'll see them right for months after that, and kind of like on a loop, if you will. I've always enjoyed watching the Super Bowl commercials from a marketing perspective as well. Kind of just a strange phenomenon of it all. I can't remember. I legitimately was thinking about it this morning. I can't remember the last time I didn't watch the Super Bowl. I can't.
You're getting old. You'll have to go back and check out some of the commercials. There were some good ones. Not a standout year by any means. Again, I have my own little ones I was chasing around, so probably only saw 80% of the game yesterday. So there was definitely some commercials I'm sure I missed. What's interesting about what you just said there, though, is there were some bigger companies who just used their same old tried and true commercials. And I noticed that yesterday. I'm like, wow, you just did the same thing you've been running for. I've seen this commercial a million times. And so I'm always curious about that conversation behind the scenes is like, you're going to spend all this money for this marketing spot. And instead of rolling out something new or doing something exciting, you're just like, hey, that 30 seconds we filmed 2 years ago, roll it. Let's go. I always think
we did a pretty good job on that.
Yeah.
Let's run it back.
Run it back. We're already spending $7 million on the slot.
It's only our 100 times our normal advertising budget. But, let's let it ride.
Yes.
One thing I found very interesting, though, so you mentioned it earlier, right? These teams played a couple years ago.
Yes.
In the Super Bowl. I can't even remember who played. I know the Chiefs played someone last year and won. I don't remember who they played.
It was the Niners, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
So a couple years ago, they play the Eagles, right? And the Chiefs won, if I remember correctly. And I know the Eagles got Barkley, right, this season. And he had just a historic season, right? He was awesome. But what do you think made the difference this time around, right? Relatively similar structure of teams, I would imagine, right? Probably not super different, but maybe they are.
I think there's a phenomenon in sports. For whatever reason, this has been a big highlight for me recently. The Oregon Ducks. I'm wearing a Ducks hoodie right now. Someone commented previously. I do wear a lot of Oregon Ducks gear. They beat Ohio State. I was actually at that game. Insane football game. Then they played them again in the playoffs, and they got curb stomped. I think beating that, there's some mental revenge aspect to sports where the opponent team is going to come into this game thinking I'm not losing this game. I already lost to this team before. I lost to this team at the highest stage of sports, the Super Bowl. I'm not going to lose again. We've talked on the podcast about mindset, mentality before. And I think there's something so intangibly strong, something that is just so powerful about that mindset. And you can't get to a revenge mindset without loot. You got to take that L. You got to take that loss. And then you can come back and you're 10 times stronger. So I feel like that is, I honestly thought, again, I can't predict the future. I can't tell you who's going to win every game, but I had a pretty good, I'm like, man, it's so hard to beat the same team twice, especially in the Super Bowl. Good luck, Kansas City. That was my thought going into the game yesterday.
I did end up going back later and rewatching a bit of the halftime show. And I had some thoughts on the halftime show.
Here we go. Yes. Here we go. Okay, continue.
Right. As long as I can remember, it does not seem to matter who the performer is at the halftime show. Seems like, and maybe there's one that you can think of that doesn't apply to this narrative, if you will, that comes to mind. But I can't remember a time in the last 10 to 15 years where someone performed at the halftime show and they didn't just get ripped apart by people. Worst halftime show ever. I've heard people for every year, for the last 10 years, they're like, they didn't do it like Michael Jackson or Prince did. in the 90s. Like every year I hear this. It's almost like it's like people forgot they said it the year before.
Right.
And it's like, you know, I didn't probably watch enough of the halftime show to really say if it was a good halftime show, a bad halftime show. I mean, I feel like
what did you think? What did you think though?
I think it's a weird setup from, you know, just in nature, because they're trying to squeeze in all their hits into like one song almost, right? They're not finishing any of their songs. They're just moving into track to track and transitioning. So it's kind of a weird setup in and of itself, right? It's not like a full on concert. So that probably puts the artist at a disadvantage.
For sure.
9 out of 10 commentary I saw about the halftime show though online was that was horrible, is the worst halftime show ever, which people say every single year.
Right.
No matter who is performing.
I think it was very polarizing. The tough part with a performer like Kendrick Lamar is his music is not family friendly by any means.
No. But he cleaned it up.
He did. And I kept waiting for him to slip up and say something, just because there's so much in his music. Yeah, I need something. I mean, and you know, so it's tough because again, that's kind of part of it, right? Not only are you have a shorter length, but then, you know, everyone's coming to you saying, "Hey, you can't say this, or this." Like, so when you're saying, make sure you don't say any of those words. What a tough weekend for Drake, though, you guys. If you thought the Chiefs took an L, I think Drake may have taken an even bigger L.
Yeah, it just never stops.
I was told he went into a separate room during the halftime show and he rewatched the Rihanna halftime show from previous years.
Which, by the way, I thought Rihanna's was pretty good.
Rihanna,
a year or two,
one of the best. A couple years. Yeah, she did incredible.
Interesting phenomenon that I thought about too when I was watching, you know, the highlights of the halftime show. If I remember right, they asked Taylor Swift to do it first. She said no because she wasn't going to be paid, because halftime performers are not paid.
Yeah, I didn't know she got asked.
She was. I read about it probably a year ago. She was asked. She said crazy. No. So she's in the audience watching who ends up doing it in Kendrick Lamar. Kind of just a weird phenomenon, because if she wanted to be, she could have been on the one on that stage.
I don't understand, and this ties back to the marketing piece of the Super Bowl, right? As an entirety, when you're looking at the halftime show, and I, for a long time, I thought the halftime performers did get paid. I didn't realize this until a few years ago. Someone made a big stink about it. I can't remember who it was. It was sometime around when Katy Perry did it. It wasn't Katy Perry, but there was some artist that was like, "You want me to perform and not get paid? No way." And it's like, you're on the biggest stage. You're going to have more eyeballs on you, more people listening to you than potentially you'll ever have at a single point in time. And historically, you can always see, like, I guarantee you, the revenue that Kendrick Lamar is earning right now today from album sales, from streaming revenue, you know, from people buying tickets to come to, he's got a tour coming up. Like, I'm sure Kendrick is making an incredible amount of money, even though he didn't get paid yesterday to perform. So it's crazy to me that that is a thing among performers. Like, again, I think Christian and I have the mindset where, like, we would 100% do something for free if we felt like the attention was there. And Gary Vee talks about this all the time too. You know, Gary Vee gets paid 6 figures to speak at events, but he's also quick to say that he would speak for free at the right event in a heartbeat.
Right. Yeah. And same goes for me, right? Like, when, you know, I've spoken at a ton of conferences, I've been paid by a few, but very few to be there. And usually when I'm paid, it's like, you know, I'll do a little promo to help them sell tickets ahead of time, something like that, right?
Right.
But typically it's completely no cost, you know, that I'm charging anybody to speak. I feel like years ago, I would have probably traveled somewhere to speak to 30 or 40 people. Now I probably won't do it unless it's a big enough event. Or if I'm being paid, it's got to be one of the two. You know, like this, you know, this year, the amount of events I'm talking at is a much shorter list than historically it was. But yeah, no, I wonder if a part of it has to do with that no matter how good or bad they do, they get ripped apart by everyone saying that was the worst halftime show of all time. That would go through my head if I was an artist, because it doesn't matter who performs, doesn't matter how
Christian's
good or
reading the
bad they
comments, you
do.
guys.
No,
Christian's reading all the comments. Okay.
to me it gives me an idea of how people are reacting to something, especially something
Yeah.
like that. If
Yeah.
I was an artist, I mean, you got to think they're aware of that at least a little bit.
For sure. I think, I've listened to a lot of podcasts, and there's a lot of very famous people who talk about, listening to the online community after big events or even something small. And it's really hard to not Google yourself or not to read the comments. And so I'm sure that might be part of it. I think it's also tough for someone like Taylor Swift, when you're as big as she is,
Sure.
to justify that attention, because she has so much of that already.
And on the flip side too, right? If you're her and you're as wealthy as you are, you're a billionaire, you're probably the biggest artist in the world right now, would you do something like that didn't pay you, that you could guarantee you'd get ripped apart for, no matter how good you did or bad? Like if you go into it with that mindset, it's a guaranteed foregone conclusion. People are going to rip me to shreds, 90%, no matter how good or bad I do. Does that change the perspective of it a little bit? Right? Because
what if the flip side though is, you're going to potentially earn the most revenue you've ever earned in your career the following week.
Sure.
But you're also going to get destroyed because half the people listening don't want to watch you or hear you.
Seems like more than half. I don't know.
It's right. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting kind of teeter-tottering thing in my mind there. Because if you're Taylor Swift, right, you probably don't need any more money. Right? Maybe
she doesn't even need the attention though. That's the crazy part. Everyone needs attention, right? You're a business owner, you're an artist, like almost everyone, no matter what. But she's at this point on the graph where like she gets so much attention at any time that she really doesn't need, it's crazy how much free. It's like Donald Trump. Donald Trump's the only person probably equivalent to Taylor Swift who can get that much free attention. They estimated, I remember in 2016, they estimated that he got tens of billions in free marketing, free press, just from people talking about him, covering him, putting him on the news.
And he's always understood that. He's one person that's always understood.
For sure.
Understood that. Yeah, speaking of which, I saw he took a shot at her.
He did.
She got booed or something. I didn't see the whole context.
So I missed this live. I turned it on right at the coin flip, but before the coin flip, apparently the camera pans to Taylor Swift. She's on the jumbotron in front of everyone. I guess there was, from what I'm hearing, and I guess from what I saw and heard myself, I guess there was a lot of Eagles fans there. I also think there might be some, I don't know what the word or term is, like kind of hating the team that's been winning too much. There's some of that going on too.
There's always that.
So, yeah, it's just hating the winners. So she's on the jumbotron, and the majority, there's a few screams and whistles and clapping, but the majority of the reaction in that stadium was just to boo her immediately. And she had this reaction. She's just like, she didn't know how to react. She was getting booed. But that plays into what you're saying though, is like, why would you want to do this if you know you're going to get up on that stage and get absolutely destroyed from a public perception? Which I think, I don't want to get too deep into this, but it's really tough when you have this stack of generations. You have baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, alphas coming. You have like 5 different generations trying to sit together and listen to me. Like, how can you agree on one artist with 5 different? Tell me one artist that 5 different generations will agree. Nobody's gonna agree on that.
I know people that I'm friends with on Facebook, for example, people that I know in my personal life, and I swear the last 6 Super Bowls, every year they post how bad the Super Bowl halftime show was. The same people every year. And I think there's a lot of those out there. There's got to be, you know, and maybe it's just me. Maybe the public perception is not leaning that side. I just feel like no matter who you are, you know, like I'm trying to think of people that recently performed. Rihanna, people said she sucked. The Weeknd. Who else?
I thought The Weeknd sucked.
there you go.
I thought
Dr.
The
Dre,
Weeknd sucked.
Dr. Dre, and all
nobody. How could you hate on Dr.
I heard
Dre
it.
and
I heard it.
Snoop? That was
I
probably the
heard
best
it.
one in the past 5-10 years.
I'm trying to think of who else might have performed. Katy Perry a million years ago. You know,
Yeah,
she was
that was
like
a
on
long
the
time
back
ago.
of an elephant, and they were like, "She sucks so hard," you know. And I'm just like, "Good Lord!" I'm like, "What can they do? What can the people do to win you over?"
So, you know, I've got to tread lightly here because I'm going to mention something NBA related, and we know when that comes up, we can lose Christian. But
show's over.
yeah, we might lose the whole show. And I want to get to our main topic here in a moment,
Yes.
you guys. But the Boston Celtics head coach was being interviewed, and
Joe Mazzulla.
yes,
Joe
Joe
Mazzulla
Mazzulla.
reference on the
Yes,
podcast.
look at that, Joe Mazzulla. Interesting. He's a character of a coach as well. I actually really like Joe Mazzulla, but he's being interviewed, and the reporter asks, you know, how's Jason Tatum? Again, if you don't follow basketball, he's like their star player. You know, how's Jason Tatum handling the criticism of his recent performance? It was something along those lines. And his immediate response was, you mean how is the privilege that he gets to he gets criticized publicly? He's like, that's a privilege. He's like, that's a privilege that people are talking about him, that he gets to play at the level he does, that he gets to be an icon in the league. And I thought that was interesting because it's this catch-22 of, you know, and I think even us, specifically you, Christian, more than even me, even in our small little niche, it's like the more attention you get, the more people that know you, the bigger you get, there's always going to be some good attention and bad attention that comes with it. You know,
I only think about it from the perspective of like, you know, and I'll say this last thing and then we'll move on to the main topic. I promise you guys. But like if I'm Taylor Swift, right, I have unlimited opportunities to get attention. I can get attention any way I want. I have options, right? If I'm presented with an option where I'm guaranteed to look bad, I'm not going to be paid for it, I can understand. You know, like, because she can go on Eras Part 2 and make another $5 billion or something like that. You know, she doesn't need the Super Bowl.
All right.
You know what I mean? So I understand it from that perspective. But maybe that's like, maybe that just kind of points to the fact that there's levels to this stuff.
There's levels, for sure.
You know, like if you're someone like Trump, you feed off of it. You know what I mean? It makes you stronger. It's like your Darth Sidious is in your ear. Feel the hate flow through you. So it doesn't matter how much money he'll make, you know, like he will be that combative figure, you know, that I think Rogan said it best, you know, New York City businessman shit talker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, you know, he understands it, he wants all the attention he can get, that kind of stuff. But if I'm Taylor Swift, I can understand that, where I have a multitude of options. I can get attention any way that I want, anytime I want. And I can do it in a way where I'm not going to be ripped apart by 90% of the people watching.
I sense some jealousy there. You just wish Christian wishes he was Taylor Swift, you guys.
Maybe someday we all can have.
Maybe tomorrow we'll open with Christian just singing. He'll just come out singing some songs for us, you guys.
Come up with a blonde wig and lipstick and all right, guys. We got to get to the main topic. Before we do so, got to quickly talk to you guys about this episode's sponsor. You guys, this episode of the 7 Figures or Bust podcast is brought to you by the 7 Figure Medicare Agent Summit, you guys. When we're talking about events are a tremendous way to grow your business because you'll be able to learn from the content if it's a good event, and 2, from the networking and relationship building activities that happen post-event in the evenings, right? Just getting to know people, hanging out with people around the country that are doing things in a big time way in their business. There is no better event in 2025 than the 7-Figure Medicare Agent Summit, guys. This is year 4, I think, 5. I don't know.
Yes, year 4.
4.
Year 4.
This is year 4 of the 7-Figure Medicare Agent Summit, you guys. It's back in Salt Lake City in June. 2 days full of jam-packed value from some of the most successful and influential people that you have in the space today. There is no pitching, guys. You will not be told to get in a room so you can be sold to get into another room. And it's this never-ending, like vortex where you're falling into of getting into different rooms, from room to room to room. Like, when's the value coming? I've been in 6 rooms now in the last 3 months.
Yes.
And I'm $50K in debt. All you have to do is buy a ticket. Tickets are $500 instead of $50K and 1 room. $500, 1 room. You'll get the value that you're promised. 7-Figure Medicare Agent Summit, guys. Tickets are limited and sells out every year. We anticipate it will this year as well. We hope to see you there.
Woo!
All right. Let's shift gears into the main topic at hand.
Yes.
And interesting one at that, right? Should you be independent or LOA? I feel like a lot of agents that are entering the space probably need to hear this discussion and this conversation right here. So first off, when I read that topic, Glenn, what is the first thing that goes through your mind?
The first thing is I think back to a Taco Tuesday episode that I think we did on this topic that was very polarizing. And as an agent, and I would say my opinion on this topic has changed quite a bit over the past decade.
Mine has to.
I went from, as a new agent, being an LOA agent. When I was brand new, I was technically an LOA agent. So I'm thinking, okay, this is a great place to start. To, okay, I don't want them to manage my commissions. This company's evil. And being an LOA agent's a horrible thing, to now kind of coming full circle and realizing, and I think it's kind of just maturing in the industry. I think a lot of people follow this cycle. I don't think it's unique for me, but so all the way to my opinion today, which is really, I think an LOA opportunity for the right person with the right company makes a lot of sense, especially for new agents. But not all opportunities are created equal. And some of these LOA shops are not great. That's just the reality of it, right? Well, but I'd be curious to know what's your first thought when you're hearing this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great first place to kind of start this off with, because I was that guy, and I'm sure you, and I think you were as well, if I remember correctly, that was very anti LOA.
Yeah.
At least I was. I know I was. I won't speak for you. I thought I remembered some conversations.
Please don't speak for me. Thank you.
I will start speaking for you exclusively.
Please don't.
but I was very anti against it, right? And it was mostly before I had really just gotten a lot of exposure to the industry. So for those of you that don't know what we're talking about, I'll give you a super quick 60-second or less summary, right? LOA, licensed only agent, can stand for other things. But essentially it means that you are assigning your commissions to a bigger agency, and that agency, almost like you're an employee of theirs. And there's a lot of different forms that LOA models can take, but most of the time you're getting a salary, you're getting extra benefits and leads and things like that. A lot of times, like, you're on staff somewhere. It's more of a role that you play in a company rather than building your own business. Although there are some that kind of try to make up almost like a hybrid of the two, independent and LOA, right? Where like you make your own hours and this and that. But like those can be good. I think it gets a little murky. I think it just kind of depends on the setup of it. But yeah, I mean, so I was that guy for a long time, that was very steadfast against it. I think what changed my opinion of it was before we started, building our agency and we had team members on our team that are LOAs. I started getting to know people in the industry that worked for big agencies that were LOA and were doing phenomenal, like making more money than 99% of independents were.
Right.
And I was like, it was almost like, it just changed my whole perspective on it, and it challenged my way of thinking,
Sure.
And then I started to realize the more I started to work with agents, and I've worked with thousands of agents over the years. I know you've worked with a lot of agents as well. And I started to realize, and even after we started bringing on LOAs on our team and started working with LOAs and things like that, and I started to have just a deeper, finite understanding of an LOA position and the different structures of it and everything like that, I started to realize that there's a lot of agents that are independent that would probably do a lot better as LOAs than they would be as independents. Every time I say that, I get people upset every single time without exception, but I say it because I believe it. I feel like
this episode of the Seven Figures or Bust podcast is brought to you by the Seven Figure University. SevenFigureUniversity.com is a culmination of Christian Brindle's and mine's educational videos that we have developed over the past 2 decades of combined experience in the senior insurance space. There's more than 250 videos, hundreds of hours of content that can help you become a top producer or a top producing agency in the senior insurance space. We're talking about videos of how to work with specific carriers, how to do different types of marketing, such as seminars or Facebook advertising, how to generate content in the niche to help grow your business, how to grow an agency, all sorts of things. There's so much value in this. It's unbelievable. Christian, what do agents need to know about Seven Figure University?
Seven Figure University can best be thought of as an agency blueprint in a box that's put together for you, that brings you step by step in every facet of building a successful 7-figure insurance agency, and lays it out all in front of you so you can follow along. Whether you guys need help with marketing, whether you guys need help with branding, whether you guys need help with hiring, training, standard operating procedures, systems and processes, automation, you name it, it's covered in this course. Not only that, you get access to my weekly training calls every Thursday that go from January through the end of September on a week-to-week basis. And you can attend those live and ask questions live. And then, of course, the recordings are put into the university afterward if you can't attend it and make the live training. So there's just so much value. It's the gift that keeps on giving, and it's a great investment into your business to kind of keep you up to date on what's going on, but also kind of point you in the right direction in various things that you're struggling with.
Some of the best training you'll be able to find, you guys, in one spot for one price. Go to sevenfigureuniversity.com and learn more.
Let's get back to the show. There's strengths and weaknesses to both sides, but to really do really well as an independent, you have to be a strong salesperson, in my opinion. There's always those people that are holier than thou out there that are like, I don't sell. I've never sold a day in my life. 10 clients usually. No better way to spot them than those types of comments. And when I say sell, I don't mean like hard selling or pressuring people in, but like maneuvering the conversation and articulating your presentation in a way that it sets the person up to be in a buyer's mood, right? And it helps them make a decision, right? That's sales, you guys. You could call it education or whatever you want, but it's sales at the end of the day. And I also think that there's so many agents out there that are just not business people, and they get spanked for it. They're just not business people. They don't know how to market. They don't know how to manage their business. They don't know how to do all of the things that comes with being a business person. They just don't have those core strengths. They're good people. They're nice people. They want to help people, Maybe they're even decent agents, but
Yeah.
they're not business people. Whereas when you're in an LOA position, and don't get me wrong, we'll talk about this more as we go, but there's good and bad LOA opportunities for sure. And there's some ones out there that are just ugly and really, really bad for sure. The whole thing about it is you're putting the trust into someone that's not you when you're
Right.
an LOA. So if you put that trust in a good person with a good organization, it can go well for you if you come in and work hard. Vice versa, if it's a bad person, they can really screw you up. But when you're in a good LOA position, you don't have to worry about any of the other BS that comes with running a business. You don't have to worry about your accounting. You don't have to worry about your marketing, where your leads are coming from, your grassroots marketing. Ideally, right? All of that stuff should
Right.
just be provided for you. You show up, you sell, you go home. Right? And I know a lot of agents that are in that type of role. We have agents in our organization that are in that type of role. They don't have to really worry too much outside of when they're off the clock, and they make really, really good money. I know a lot of LOAs that make $200,000 to $500,000 a year in income, personal income.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so you're very shielded from the risk, I guess, that comes with being an independent business owner.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point to make, because I think, again, as someone who was an LOA agent at one point and then went independent, you don't realize how much you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. I love saying that. You don't realize how much potentially that, and again, every opportunity, every LOA shop, every agency is doing things a little differently. Some are really rolling out the red carpet for their LOAs. Others are just kind of doing the bare minimum. So, take this with a grain of salt, but I would say the majority of LOAs out there don't understand all the things that their upline or their agency is doing for them to help them be successful. It could be, just some examples off the top of my head. It could be technology related, right? So that could be equipment, could be hardware. It could be, software like a dialer, like a CRM. It could be some automations. It could be content related. I mean, not to mention when you look at like building a brand, like if they already have an established brand that you get to come in and sell under versus trying to start a brand yourself from scratch, there's a huge value in that is hard to even put a monetary value on. The marketing, the leads, the training, the carrier relationships. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. And it's one of those things where, like, I almost feel like if I had known everything that I knew now, maybe I would have never left being an LOA agent. Because if you're in the right opportunity, like Christian said, you can make a lot of money and be really successful and potentially not have to work as much as you would as an independent agent. I also think, there's a stat that we've thrown around on the show quite a bit, and this is a real number. Some of you probably still don't think it's real, but the average Medicare agent is only writing 4 or 5 apps a year. So, if that's the majority of licensed Medicare agents, if the majority of licensed Medicare agents are only going to write 4 or 5 apps a year, wouldn't you rather try to work inside another company, inside another agency, where maybe you cannot be that agent and you can actually write 100 or 200 apps? On the final expense side, there's this constant battle of contract levels, especially with independent agents, where it's like, oh, well, I have a 100. What do you have? I have a 105. Oh, I want that 5%. Man, if I had that 5%, I'd be making so much more money. Oh, I have a 110 for that carrier. Well, it's like, guys, 110% of zero is zero. Who gives a shit how much you're writing, or who cares what your contract level is if you're not writing any business? And I think that's where a lot of LOAs get trapped in this mindset of like, man, if I was, the grass is greener, if I was just independent, if I just had a higher contract level, I'd make more money. But it's almost the opposite, I would say, most of the time.
I heard Patrick Bet-David say one time that, like, would you rather be the 5th or 6th guy in Facebook or your own tech startup, that like never goes anywhere, right? With which the vast majority of them never go anywhere, right? Like obviously people see the scenario of like, well, I could go off. Okay, I could be the fifth or sixth guy on Facebook, or I could go off and start my own Facebook and we'll be bigger than Facebook. And the chances
I'll be
of
the
that happening,
100th. Sign me up for the 100th guy on Facebook.
Yeah.
Before trying to start my own. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like,
it's a great analogy.
And I think it makes a lot of sense. Over the weekend, before I discovered that my wife was sick, she was kind of complaining, during all this was happening, that she was starting to get a little bit of the sniffles, as they say.
Did she fake it to get out of the Led Zeppelin movie? Is that what this was?
We went to her movie, actually.
Oh.
So we went out on date night on Saturday, and she's complaining a little bit. She's like, my throat's starting to hurt. I'm like, yeah, I'll be fine. So anyway, I'm going somewhere with the story.
Yes. Of course,
unlike
you
most
are.
stories. No, we have this babysitter that watches our daughter.
Yes.
And she lives in the neighborhood. She's 18 years old, and she's going to school right now, and she wants to start a business. And every time she comes over, she's always in my ear about this, because she's asked questions about what I do. She sees our house. She's like, putting the dots together, putting the clues together, if you will. And so we've had conversations before a little about what I do, and that I started the company and blah, 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 blah. And so we get home from the date night, and as she's getting ready to leave and I'm paying her, she starts asking me questions. And one of the questions that she asked me, I thought it was very relevant to this kind of situation, was, she's like, I want to start, my own thing this summer and drop out of college. And I want to go for it, just go big for it. And she's like, but my parents think I should start smaller and gain more experience. What do you think? She asked me that. And first thing I'm thinking of, I'm like, if I disagree with your parents, they're going to be at my door, knocking on my door. So like, I have that in the back of my mind. But one thing I did tell her was like, I'm like, if I was your parent, this is what I would tell you. I think you don't know anything. You're very, very young, and you don't have any experience. So the risk is at an all-time high by doing that. Whereas if you start a little slower, you stay in school, you ease your way in, you're getting more experience. The risk is less risky if you're seasoned and know what you're doing a little bit more. It's at an all-time high of risk if you're literally building the plane on the way down. Like you see all these posts on social media, like entrepreneurship is building the plane on the way down and hoping that it works. Most people die when they do that, when they hit the ground.
Well, most entrepreneurs fail.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe that should be the message for people, in my opinion. Like, if like for example, right, you and I are both seasoned in our industry with what we do. If we're going to, let's say, spend, I don't know, let's say we're going to spend 10 grand on a marketing endeavor of some kind.
Let's say 20 grand on the funeral for MedSup. Let's just
hypothetically.
Let's just throw this out there, okay?
But it's gonna be really all not that risky if you think about it, because both of us are really experienced. We know what we're doing. The chances of it not going well is much smaller than someone that this is their first time doing anything.
But here's devil's advocate to this person's situation specifically, right? What's the risk really? Because I mean, she lives at home, her bills are probably close to zero.
Sure.
So it's high. You're right in the sense that it's high risk that the chance of hitting success, if you go all in, you drop out of college, you're probably not going to be the next Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not, but the flip side of it is like, you're not falling from 40,000 feet like we would be. You know, we would be falling. You're falling from the playground. You're falling 10 feet. You got
Off
an
the monkey
owie.
bars.
Yeah, you're off the monkey bars. You're going home. We would be falling from 40,000 feet. We'd probably black out from lack of oxygen before we even impacted. So it's a different type of risk. But again, to circle this back to the LOA conversation, I think as an LOA, you can go independent anytime. You don't have to make this move right away and think I need to build up my own. If I were brand new in the industry again, and again, directly correlating to this risk conversation we're just talking about, being a salaried LOA, which not all LOAs get a salary, but a lot of them do. I would say most of them do. Your risk of losing any sort of time or money is very low.
Mm-hmm.
You're guaranteed typically a salary. A lot of times you're getting commissions. Sometimes you might be getting renewals depending on the position. It's such a great way to get paid and learn the industry.
Yeah.
And then at any point you can make that move when you're ready or when you're feeling comfortable or confident, or maybe you'd never make that move and that's fine too.
Yeah. Maybe you're like, this is the best thing for me. Like going back to the Patrick Bet-David analogy, like he talks a lot about not everyone is a number one, and that's okay. There's very few real number ones out there. And if you're a number two, a number three, a number four, having the self-awareness to identify that will actually make you go much farther, live a happier life, and probably avoid a lot of pain and suffering by identifying that early if you have the ability to do so. I always thought that was super interesting. And with the babysitter situation, the other thing I'm thinking about too is like, she's talking about going into debt and things like that, to start up her business and everything like that, dropping out of college. I'm like, if this doesn't work, I don't want you to blame me.
Come back. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because
I was gonna say, like, that's some awfully conservative advice from you. I feel like if you didn't have skin in the game in that sense, I feel like you might give a different opinion.
If I was advising myself, let's say, younger me, I probably would give drastically different advice. But
you said go for it.
Here's the thing. I know who I am.
Right.
And I know
who knows what.
I know, what I'm supposed to do. And I know, now, of course, hindsight's 2020, but like now I know I can drive a business forward and make it very successful. But most people can't. So I feel like giving that advice to someone who can't, who just doesn't have the ability to do so. Like, I feel like that's how a lot of people get into a lot of these like huge courses and masterminds and stuff like that, and they're just not that person. I used to think anybody could become that person. And my opinion has kind of shifted over the years. Like Gary Vaynerchuk says, all the time that you need self-awareness, to know who you are and to know kind of what your skill set is. And I kind of am, as I get older, lean towards that more because I've worked with so many people. And the biggest mistake I've made, whether it be employees or whether it be agents or anything like that, and I feel like one of the biggest mistakes I've made is expecting everyone to be me. And what I've realized is almost no one is me. I'm from outer space,
Yes, that's true, guys. You heard it here first. Christian is an alien, quite literally.
But no, I feel like the self-awareness conversation has to be a part of this.
Yes. Yeah, I'm a huge, and I think Gary Vee is one of the bigger entrepreneur influencers in the space that has talked a ton about self-awareness that I think is super important, because if you're not self-aware to know what your strengths and weaknesses are, if you're not self-aware to know, I can't do this or I can do this, you're going to have a really tough time. If you think you can just put your nose to the grindstone and just push through, not saying that you can't necessarily figure some stuff out and do it all on your own, but you're just going to make it a lot harder than it needs to be for yourself most of the time. I think that as an agency owner, when I've gone through the same thing that you're talking about, where you're like, why aren't you like me? Like, why can't? But again, that self-awareness of, oh, well, it's actually problematic if you want to come in and try to run the company with me in that way, or if you think you know the better direction than I do, I need someone who can really help, guide the ship, not help me navigate it. I've got the navigation part down. I'm self-aware. That's my talent. I just need you to hold the wheel and make sure we stay on course. So again, that comes from self-awareness, and that's being self-aware it can be tough. It can be tough to even some of the small things. It can be tough to be self-aware of.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And like, I think someone's going to watch this and say, Christian is telling me that I shouldn't be independent. That's not what I'm saying, but I think you should look at yourself with that self-awareness. And I think if you want to be independent and you want to do really well, I think you have to be very hardworking. You need to not complain about said hard work.
Yeah.
You need to have that stamina for that hard work. I think you need to be able to have a lot of endurance for the rejection, the grit of the letdowns, and almost like the roller coastery aspects of running the business. I think you need to be committed to continuously learning how you can run the business better, how you can market better, how you can just grow your skill sets to help the business better. Those are the characteristics of someone, and you have to be willing to risk. Being willing to risk your time, being willing to risk your money and investing into your business. Like, you need to have all of that.
Yeah.
And I feel like a very small percentage of the people in the population actually have those characteristics. I feel like most people want safety, stability. They want to be able to do their work, get rewarded for their work, and be done.
Well, let's talk about this. We talked about delayed gratification on the pod, and it came up on a podcast I was listening to recently, and they were talking about how it's like one of the most important aspects of success in life, and I thought it was so interesting because we had already talked about it, but you could be working for Christian, see him pull up in a BMW, and think, "Holy shit, I need to go independent, and I can get rich like Christian." And it is so not a get rich quick scheme. It is essentially the antithesis. It is literally quite the opposite of a get rich quick scheme. It is a get rich slow scheme. It takes years, decades potentially, to really get to that point where you're seeing the rewards from what you've put in. The other entrepreneur cliche that comes to mind as we're talking about this is, you can go work for someone for 40 hours, or you can work for yourself and put 80 hours in that week. And I know my first 10 years of working for myself, that was essentially how it was. It was like, I could go to work for someone and I'm getting a paycheck and I'm working 40 hours, 50 hours a week. And, that's my average work week. And then all of a sudden I'm working for myself, and I was 10 times harder on myself. I'm making myself work 10 times more than what my boss was. And it's just not cut out for everyone. And being self-aware of that is because, again, ultimately I would want, whether it's our agent or anyone listening to this podcast or watching this, I want you to make the best decision for yourself. This isn't about, what's going to ultimately earn you the most money, or, where you can write the most applications. Like, I want this to be the best fit for you personally in your life, and what's going to make you the most happy. Your level of success might be different than what Christian and I are trying to achieve. Christian and I are trying to, achieve global domination, essentially. Not every agent comes into the game to do that. Some of you just want to supplement your existing income. Some of you are partially retired and you're just doing this almost as a hobby, and that's totally fine. I'm not here to tell you that you can't do that, but it does circle back to that self-awareness.
Yeah. And, I think you bring up a great point when you say not every agent wants to just come in and just dominate. And that's okay. I think just to make it in general, it is very difficult. It's very hard. And, I think at the very least for the first 3 to 5 years, you're going to have to go through a lot of personal sacrifices and a lot of delayed gratification. Like, you want to talk about delayed gratification? The BMW I'm driving now.
Hey, hang on. Let's talk. I want to talk about those sacrifices. Let's
Yes.
really get in first 3 years.
Yeah.
Let's talk about
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about the wins because that's the sexy part. Everybody talks about their wins. That's what everybody wants to see here. Let's talk about what you're losing, what you're giving up on, especially those first 3 years. If you want to go independent, you really want to make it. Maybe you do want to dominate. Well, what does that look like?
You can't spend frivolously. You just can't do it. Like, I'm thinking about myself, right? So my first 3 years in the business, I drove a 2000 Nissan Altima. It's like silver. The paint was coming off and it barely worked. It had transmission problems, It made strange noises when you were driving. I was like, oh, that doesn't sound good. When we ended up selling it, we sold it and we had to have like 5 people look at it to have anyone even offer it to us, but we sold it for like $1,000. We couldn't get any more than that. And most people didn't want to pay that.
This is safe. Like, we don't think this is safe.
So then I get the Ford Focus that I drove until 3 months ago. I drove that for 10 years, got it to about 160,000 miles on it.
Wow.
My wife kept crashing into it because she didn't have a backup camera on her car. So I remember one time I had it parked in the driveway, and she does it like most people. Like they'll do one of these when they're she doesn't. She just it goes flying backwards and crashes into it.
Hopefully no one's behind me.
But that car went through hell.
Man.
It was a $20,000 car when I bought it and brand new.
Yeah.
Like when I sold it for $500 because that's all I could get for it. And so like everybody talks about cars, right? There's some delayed gratification for you.
Yeah.
The car I'm driving now is the nicest car I've ever drove, but I didn't get it and until I was in year 11, basically.
Right.
Some other things was like, I love the home we're living in now, but we lived in a lot of apartments, a lot of small homes, things like that, over the years because I wanted to put more back into my business. You're talking about when I came into the business, I was 21. All my friends wanted to party and drink and hang out and everything like that. And I just over time became so turned off to all that because I wanted to work. And I wanted to be around people that were talking about the same things I was talking about. And they were like, oh, you're so lame. And I'm thinking the same thing about them. I'm like, you're so lame. So personal relationships, right?
Yes. That's a big one for me.
Personal relationships.
Yeah.
Just outgrowing people.
Yeah.
And not settling for the wrong relationships along the way.
Yep.
Like there were a lot of people that I started to get to know or I crossed paths with in my life in my 20s where I was like, I just don't want to be around you.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be around you. Whereas it'd be much easier just to be like, screw it. Let's go hang out. Let's go to the club. Let's go to the bar.
Yeah.
But that was not me. I was a big believer in the people you spend your time with, you become. I was a huge believer in that, and I still am. What else? Vacations, travel.
That was my list too, right? Everyone's traveling, social media, they're posting their pictures. Look at me, look where I am. I just didn't go anywhere
for years. For years and years and years.
Yeah. or it was like one trip, or it's
Yeah.
like I did one trip that year,
Any missed on? I mean, there's a lot. We could probably do a podcast all about that, but
Yeah, I mean, so me personally, home ownership was a big one that I sacrificed for a while. Again, Christian talked about, the main reason that these things got put off wasn't because we didn't want them or they weren't important to us. It was because the business demanded more money than I could pull out of it to accomplish these other things. And something like home ownership isn't like a lot. I mean, a middle median home in America, like that's not some lavish luxury by any means. But at regardless, at the beginning, it was like, nope, can't buy a house yet. Got to put the money back into the business. I think personal time, like you mentioned with friends, like, something as trivial as just going out for dinner, just wouldn't happen. It just wouldn't happen. The traveling was a big one. Maybe I'd do one trip here or there, but a lot of trips that just didn't happen that I wanted to go on. There's so much like consumerism, things that, maybe you wanted to buy. It could be the TV, it could be the computer, whatever, like that. Again, that just didn't happen. So, that's the sort of stuff, you guys. And yeah, I mean, we're at the top of the hour, so I want to start to wrap up here, but
yeah,
we could easily probably do an entire episode on just the first 3 years, ... Like that could be the title, because it's such a night and day difference from where we're at now. I mean, right now, Christian and I could go anywhere in the world. We could tomorrow be like, we could buy tickets we could get off this podcast right now and be like, hey, you want to go to Dubai? Be like, okay, let's go to Dubai. It's like, but to get to this point, like it's almost a disservice to put that out there without you guys understanding what we went through those first 3, 4, 5 years, even like 7 years for me, if I'm being honest. I feel like it was really like 7 years before I really got my sea legs under me.
I would say, like, if you really want to grow, and I can wrap this into my final thoughts, but like,
yeah.
I mean, people say it's kind of cliche. People say, like, in our space specifically, like the first 2 to 3 years is tough. The first 3 to 5 years is tough. Like, if you really want to grow, like it's like a decade.
Yeah, it really
you know
is.
what I mean? Like that. I mean, people are thinking about, I've heard people say, I want you to wrap your head around 2 to 3 years. I want you to wrap your head around a decade.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's a commitment.
But that decade invested can set you up forever
For life. Yeah.
So that's the reward at the end of that's the lucky charms at the end of the rainbow.
That's
as
right.
They say.
It is.
Any final thoughts, Glenn, on this episode?
Yeah, I used to watch Shark Tank all the time. If you guys haven't seen Shark Tank, it's some of the most successful business owners like Mark Cuban, Mr. Wonderful, who is Kevin O'Leary, and there's several others, and they have guests on sometimes. But the whole show is someone comes in with their existing business or an idea for a business, product, service. They're pitching it to the sharks. They're potentially making an investment, their own money, to help grow the business, scale the business. So they have all these really interesting conversations around that, and it's come up on that show many times. This idea of an overnight success, right? Like if you're new to the industry, or if you didn't know Christian and you just jumped into the Facebook group, it'd be really easy to look at Christian and be like, man, I didn't even know who he was a year ago, 2 years ago. I didn't even know who he was. And now look what's going on. But what you're not seeing is that decade, that 10 years. And in the show, they talk about it all the time. It's like this overnight success is really 10 years. And I feel like I heard almost all of these prolific business owners say the same thing. Mark Cuban, especially, I know he said that, where it's like, yeah, a lot of people just see that top point on the mountain when you are at your highest level of success, and they do think, oh, wow, look at this flash in the pan, this person that just made it overnight. No, it did take a decade. And if you come into the industry from, to kind of wrap up this whole LOA independent conversation, if you come in as an independent agent and you're like, I know it's going to suck for the first few years, but I have a strong feeling if I just commit for the next decade, I'm going to be somewhere really great at the end of it. You're in a great headspace for what's coming. Because if you come into this with kind of the opposite of that and you're like, okay, I'm going to be rich in 2 years and I'm going to start today. Good luck. That's an uphill battle for sure. So very, very interesting episode. Really enjoyed this topic.
Yes.
Guys, I want to mention my final thought here. Freebie Friday happens every Friday. We gave away 3 virtual assistants last Friday for Freebie Friday. And all you have to do is comment on one of these live streams that we're doing every week in the group. We do typically 4 per week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Just drop a comment, automatically enters you into the giveaway. And then every Friday afternoon, early Friday evening, you'll see that raffle go out and you could potentially be a winner. All sorts of great prizes. So stay tuned.
Guys, thanks so much for watching all the way to the end. If you are watching on a platform that allows you to do so, if you catch the replay, comment #team replay. We love to know who ends up watching after the fact. If you're listening to us on an audio platform that allows you to do so, please give us a 5-star review, such as Apple Podcasts. We would greatly appreciate that. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, you name it. And we will be back with another episode. Wishing you guys nothing but massive success in your businesses. See you in the next one. Thanks, everybody.